They called it the empire on which the sun never sets. But behind the glory, there was darkness. A darkness built on blood, slavery, and rebellion. From India to Africa. From sugar plantations in the Caribbean to the opium fields of China. Millions suffered, so that a few could wear crowns of gold. But how did Britain, a small island in Europe, build such a vast empire? And what terrible secrets did it hide beneath its polished image of civilization and progress? That's what we're uncovering today. The dark side of the empire, slavery, rebellion, and secrets. But before we dive into this untold chapter of history, make sure to subscribe to Dusk and Times, because here we don't just tell history, we expose it. The British Empire began with trade. Tea, sugar, tobacco, cotton. Simple goods that would shape the world. But there was one ingredient they didn't talk about: human lives. By the 17th century, Britain had become one of the largest players in the Atlantic slave trade. Ships left British ports loaded with guns, cloth, and rum. They sailed to Africa, traded those goods for men, women, and children, then crossed the Atlantic. The Middle Passage, one of the darkest routes in human history, crammed into the holds of ships, chained, starving, and sick. Millions never made it to shore. Those who did were sold on plantations across the Caribbean and Americas. Sugar from those plantations filled British tables. Cotton from slave fields powered British factories. And the wealth funded Britain's rise as a global superpower. They called it the Golden Age. But for millions it was an age of pain. And yet, even in that darkness, sparks of rebellion began to burn. You see, history rarely tells us this, but the enslaved didn't stay silent. From Jamaica to Barbados, uprisings erupted again and again. One of the most famous was the Haitian Revolution, where enslaved Africans defeated the mighty European empires and created the first free black republic. This sent shockwaves through the British colonies. Plantation owners grew paranoid. The empire doubled down, harsher punishments, stricter laws. But rebellion couldn't be chained. In 1831, Samuel Sharp, a Baptist deacon in Jamaica, led a massive revolt known as the Baptist War. It was crushed, but it became the final spark that forced Britain to confront its sins. Just 2 years later, in 1833, the Slavery Abolition Act was passed. But here's the cruel twist. The enslaved got freedom. The slave owners got compensation. The British government paid the equivalent of $20 billion today, not to the victims, but to the masters. And the cost? It was paid off by British taxpayers until 2015. Yes, people alive today were still paying for slavery's debt. That's the hidden price of freedom. Slavery was outlawed, but exploitation simply changed its face. The empire turned east, to India, to China, to Africa. They called it trade, but it was control in disguise. In India, the British East India Company had already taken power. In China, they found something even more profitable: opium. When the Chinese emperor tried to ban it, Britain went to war, not for defense, but to force a nation into addiction. The opium wars of the 19th century weren't about freedom. They were about money. Britain demanded open ports, free trade, and the right to sell poison. Millions of Chinese lives were destroyed. But in London, banks flourished, tea flowed, and the empire kept expanding. They called it progress, but behind it lay exploitation on a global scale. While colonies were being stripped of resources, Britain entered its industrial revolution. Factories, machines, and steam engines transformed the nation. The empire bragged about innovation and modernity, but few realized those factories ran on cotton from India and the American South. The ships were built with Caribbean sugar wealth, and the labor, both at home and abroad, was brutal. Children as young as 6 worked in coal mines. Indian farmers were forced to grow indigo and jute instead of food. And when famine hit, grain was still exported to keep profits flowing to London. So while smoke rose from British chimneys, fires of hunger burned across the colonies. Progress had a dark price tag, and that tag was paid in lives. The empire called itself unstoppable, but rebellion followed it wherever it went. In India, the 1857 revolt. What began with a rumor about rifle cartridges became a full-blown war. Indian soldiers, peasants, and princes united to drive the British out. The British crushed it brutally. Villages burned, thousands executed, and yet the rebellion changed everything. It showed that even the mightiest empire could bleed. In Africa, resistance grew too. From Zulu warriors in South Africa to the Ashanti Empire in West Africa, kingdoms fought back with pride and fury. But the empire had guns, railways, and a ruthless system of divide and rule. They won, but only on paper, because each rebellion planted a seed of freedom that would one day crack the empire from within. Behind every glorious monument in London, there's a story they never told you. The British Museum, filled with treasures looted from colonies, from the Kohinoor diamond to Egyptian mummies. The tea rooms of London, fueled by plantation labor and opium profits. The statues of heroes, some of them were slave traders, others mass murderers, their crimes washed away with fancy titles and marble pedestals. Even the phrase, "white man's burden," was propaganda. It claimed the empire was civilizing the world, but in truth, it was enslaving it in new ways, through education, religion, and culture. Whole nations were taught to feel inferior, languages suppressed, histories erased. That's the real secret of the empire. It didn't just conquer lands, it conquered minds. By the early 1900s, cracks were forming. Colonies were restless. New movements were rising. In India, Gandhi's message of nonviolence began to spread. In Africa, leaders demanded independence. In the Caribbean, workers struck against unfair labor. The empire was stretched thin, and then came the final blow. World War I. Millions of colonial soldiers fought and died for Britain, believing they were fighting for freedom. But when the war ended, they returned home to the same chains. The hypocrisy was too much to hide. The glory of empire was breaking under its own weight. Today, the British Empire is gone, but its shadows remain. The borders it drew still cause conflict. The wealth it took still shapes the world. The stories it buried are only now being told. And yet, out of that darkness came resilience. Nations rose again. Languages revived. Histories reclaimed. The empire fell. But humanity learned something from it, that no power lasts forever, and no lie can hide the truth forever. Because in the end, the sun that never set was finally swallowed by the shadows it created. So, what was the British Empire really built on? Trade? Civilization? Or something far darker? That's a question history still struggles to answer. But our journey doesn't end here. Because next time on Dusk and Times, we uncover what happened after the Empire's golden age, when war, pride, and broken promises reshaped the world. Get ready for the next episode, World War I and Britain's Broken Glory. If this story opened your eyes, like, share, and subscribe to Dusk and Times, because history isn't just about kings and crowns. It's about the secrets that built our world. Keep watching, keep wondering, and never stop questioning the empire's truth.